clarity. When you have it, you have control. You can feel refreshed. There's energy, motivation, a sense of direction into the future. When you don't have it, it can be just the opposite. We can feel lost, like we don't have control, super uncertain around where things might go. So join me as we explore Clarity, Volume 1. It's the Leading on Purpose podcast, helping leaders, teams, and organizations lead more intentionally, effectively, and with purpose. Well, welcome to the podcast, and thanks for tuning in as we dig into Clarity, Volume 1. So why am I calling it Volume 1? Well, clarity comes in many different shapes and sizes, as you probably already well know, particularly for us as leaders. There's personal clarity, which is what this episode will be all about. But in future episodes, I'm going to dig into the other forms of clarity that are also really important to our success, such as the clarity that we establish for our teams that we support, the clarity we get from our boss, the clarity we have in terms of the direction of the organization. So clarity comes in many different shapes and sizes. But today we're going to start Volume 1 with personal clarity. Now, why focus on this? Because it's a big topic, and to be perfectly honest, exploring this over the course of a 25 to 30 minute podcast episode is even overwhelming for me to think about. Because typically, when I work with leaders on raising their level of personal clarity, working on their why, their purpose, it's done in longer form, to be quite honest. And so one version of this that I do is a cohort style program where we'll actually put several leaders, 15 or 16 folks at a time, really kind of lock them in a room for a week to really unpack this notion of your why, your own level of personal clarity. When I'm working with folks in a coaching capacity, more one-to-one, it takes several conversations spread out over the course sometimes of 2 to 3 months for us to break it down into bite-sized pieces and really help this individual through the one-on-one coaching raise their level of personal clarity. But nonetheless, I want to give you some ideas, some frameworks, some things to think about. I don't believe that by the end of 25 minutes of listening to this that you're going to have the personal clarity that you're looking for. I think you're going to want to take some notes, process some of the things that I've mentioned, and probably spend a little time with it, to be perfectly honest. So, why work on this? Why work on our why? Well, I've got to tell you, in episode 1, we talked a lot about the degree of fatigue and burnout that is just really common right now for leaders. And the number one root cause that I'm noticing behind all that fatigue, all that burnout, people just getting stuck in a rut, is just not getting up in the morning with a strong enough sense of personal clarity, not knowing our why, not knowing why should I go into work today and why should anyone else care. So my experience has been, and my research has unearthed the very same thing I've observed, which is, I think, unfortunately, for most leaders, we don't think about some of these things, our why, until it's too late. And so I want to point you to a few examples and stories just to get us thinking around why, think about our why. So the first thing I'll mention to you, there's an individual by the name of Bronnie Ware, and a pretty amazing individual. She worked in hospice care for many years of her career, and since then has transitioned into publishing memoirs and books based on her learnings, based on her experiences with patients who, frankly, were at the end of life. There's a particular memoir in Bronnie Ware's work that I think connects really strongly to our conversation today. And it was a book entitled Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And I don't want this to be too heavy for you. I don't want to go too deep too fast, but I think it's important to cement in our minds why, work on my why. And so the deeper you can go, the better. My experience has been when people are thinking about having this conversation with themselves, they just don't go deep enough. And so I don't want to scare you off, but top 5 regrets of the dying, the number one regret at the top of her list, as she treated these patients who are at the end of their lives over several decades of her career, the number one regret was I wish I had had the courage to live a life true to myself rather than true to other people's expectations. And so number one regret that she cites. And I've got to tell you, I've seen professional examples of a similar notion, basically coming across leaders who are really at the end of their careers and wishing they had done it a little differently. And so I'll tell you a couple of those stories. First one was a CEO that I worked with probably about 18 months ago. And this was a CEO who had been brought into their organization probably 5 or 6 years prior to my meeting them, and was given the directive of basically, it's broke, fix it. And he stepped into this organization to really right the financial ship. And he was able to accomplish that mission of really balancing the books, resuming profitability, doing some amazing things to instill some discipline in the organization and just move them to a much healthier place in terms of their financials. Well, he did that really in his first 2 years. What was interesting is he reached out to me because, best I can say, his spider sense was tingling a little bit in terms of just realizing, there's something a little off in our culture. And not that he wasn't proud of the turnaround and proud of righting the financial ship, but maybe the behaviors that served him well during that initial 2 years of getting the financials and the books cleaned up. I think he was having this realization, those aren't serving me well anymore. It's like we checked that box, but now we're still kind of leading with the very same behaviors, and it's actually potentially doing damage to our people and our culture. And so it was really interesting. He reached out and again, we kind of worked through this together. And certainly I think his spider sense was confirmed as we went out and did some exploratory conversations with various members of the organization, from leaders all the way to frontline employees. And absolutely, their notion was, yeah, he was ripe for the time. For that first 2 years, we needed what he brought, but we really haven't moved off of those behaviors. And now our culture is really suffering because of it. And so, we worked through some pretty amazing things. I was pretty proud of the project and really proud of the CEO for the pivot he was making to just lead differently. And, I'll never forget some of the things he told me, because, by the way, he reached out about 9 months before he was set to retire. And so this was him in a way kind of thinking about, what am I leaving behind? What's my legacy? And, hold on to that legacy idea, because I'm going to come back to that in just a few moments. But here's the CEO, months away from finishing out what had been a very successful career. You would look at this individual's track record of being able to step into organization after organization and right the financial ship. That was kind of his MO over the years. Yet here he is with some regrets. Here he is basically telling me, I wish I had a mulligan. And I wish I had stood for some different things when it comes to the people I've led over the years. He kind of wished he had less body bags in his wake, less turnover, less people that he had really kind of blown through in the interest of financially minded pursuits. And so it's a balancing act. In later seasons, we're going to talk about leadership and the need for us to balance these pieces around what our people need, producing the results that we're expected to produce for the role that we're in. But this individual had identified, unfortunately, at the end, I'm way out of whack. And so the headline here for you, why think about my why now, why raise my personal clarity now, is I want to urge you to not wait until the end. The other thing I want to urge you to think about is many leaders, and I've seen it and I've read research on this, have been guilty of waiting until almost a catastrophe occurs. They get fired. They get extremely negative feedback from their team. They kind of lose their team somewhere along the way. Other example, a personal crisis can occur, and it takes that sometimes for a leader to kind of wake up and find themselves in terms of their purpose and that clarity that they should have been thinking about the whole way along. So a second story I'll share that I think speaks to this, let's not wait for the catastrophe to happen. I was coaching an individual about a year ago, and this was a vice president level person. She reported to a member of the executive team. And so one of the challenges she was having was her relationship with her boss, and really feeling like I can't break through to my boss. She emails me every hour of the day, all weekend long. And I feel like she is setting an expectation for me that this is a 24/7 job, a 24/7 career. And so she was really frustrated by this. And so over the course of a couple coaching conversations, we really built up a game plan whereby my coachee was going to go talk to their boss and share some tough feedback around the impact that being emailed on the weekend, being called and texted while she's on vacation, the impact that all of these things were having on not just her perception of her role, but really her life. That was the type of impact it was having. And so we built that up over a couple of conversations. And so after our second conversation working on this, she was to go give this feedback to her boss. So third coaching conversation comes around. Now, date-wise, we're to be on the other side of her having talked to her boss. So, of course, first thing I do is check in and say, how's it going with your boss? And she proceeded to tell me, amazing. There's no more emails on the weekends. The boss is kind of leaving me alone. And in fact, I had a long weekend that I took during this last month. Didn't bother me at all. It was actually very supportive in what she could do to support me as I stepped away. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, amazing. The coaching's working. Great. And I said, okay, well, great. How'd the feedback conversation go then? Must have gone pretty well. She proceeded to tell me, well, I never had it. And so I'm scratching my head going, okay, well, what happened? Well, apparently her boss ended up in the hospital. And while in the hospital, and I won't get into the medical details of the situation, but she was in pretty bad shape. While in the hospital, apparently had resumed taking Zoom calls, had participated in some meetings, had her binder there and was completing some work while in the hospital bed, to the point that her husband had to step in. And I'm not sure the details of that conversation, but basically said, what are you doing? This is not who you are. This is not, you need to focus on your health right now. And so it was this catastrophic situation that really forced an epiphany on this particular leader. And so I just share a couple stories there because I really want you to be compelled to think about this now. Let's not be guilty of what so many leaders out there are guilty of, waiting till the end or waiting till some crisis occurs for us to really think about ourselves and kind of find ourselves in terms of our leadership. Now, one thing I'll tell you, there's an irony in this topic for me, because as I stepped into consulting the last several years and worked with various leaders, my why, my personal clarity has evolved since my days as a corporate leader. And so the irony for this topic for me is my why, my level of personal clarity is centered around helping leaders find their personal clarity, find their why. So if I can do nothing else for the people I work with or through this podcast, but I can raise your personal clarity, that's going to fulfill me. That's going to check the box for me and make me feel like I'm doing what I'm here to do. So no matter where you're starting today's conversation, this journey of personal clarity is absolutely fine. I have a mentor of mine who would say this almost all the time to me. And then in leadership development workshops he facilitates, what he says is, when you're thinking about your leadership development, you have to begin the journey where you are, not where you'd like to be. And so it's really important for you to be honest. Where am I at now? Have I ever thought about personal clarity before? Because it's fine if you haven't. Okay. Is this something you've done in the past? Have you actually put pen to paper and scripted out a purpose statement for yourself that you've declared to people in your life? That's fine too. You begin the journey where you're at. Because, by the way, no matter where you're at on the spectrum here, you've never thought about this before, you've spent a lot of time with it before, I'm confident what we're going to cover is going to be helpful no matter where you're at. Because I think no matter where you're at, we all have a few things in common. So first thing, I'd hazard a guess that we all share in common when it comes to our own level of personal clarity. Number one, very easy for us to avoid or stop thinking about it. The world right now just has so much noise. It's so easy to get distracted from why we're doing. You get so consumed with what we're doing, how we're doing it, that you lose sight of why am I doing it? Why do I get up in the morning? What's the personal clarity behind this aspect of my life? Number two, and this is kind of related to the first, but it's very easy to get distracted from engaging yourself in things that make your why true, things that make your personal clarity come to life. And so for me, it'd be one thing for me to be very clear every morning. My why is to help others find their why, help people raise their personal clarity. But then on the second piece, if I wasn't actively pursuing projects, work, and coachees that allowed me to help people find their personal clarity, that would be an example of me just not doing anything about my why. And so next episode, one of the things we're going to talk about is how to engage yourself in activities that actually fulfill you. So staying very rooted and connected in why we do what we do. And then third piece, and this goes back to something I covered in the first episode and even a little bit here already, is we all have this in common, how easy it is for the lack of personal clarity to contribute to fatigue, burnout, just getting stuck in a rut and being lost in terms of our career and our direction sometimes in life. When we don't have personal clarity, I can almost promise you to a T, it's going to feed into those things. Okay, so 3 areas I'm going to challenge you to focus on to raise your level of personal clarity, to really begin establishing what is my why. Now, in the long term, as you continue to work on this, just know that even for folks that spend a lot of time on this, their why is ever evolving. And what you'll find, and what you probably already know about yourself, is your life changes. And the things that fulfill you, the things that are important to you, the needs that the people who interact with us in our lives, personally and professionally, change. And so the role we play tends to evolve along with, our timeline in life. And so this is an ever evolving thing. It's not something you're going to etch in stone and keep forever. It's going to have some basic tenets and premise and foundation that's probably going to stay the same, probably forever. But there's going to be aspects of it that should be ever evolving. And so I'm going to challenge you to have this be a continued work in progress, both in terms of how you define your level of personal clarity, and then certainly how you live into the personal clarity that you possess. Great. So the 3 areas that we're going to take a look at. 1, I want to challenge you to think about, what do you value most? Okay. Second area I'm going to have you focus in on is when we think about the word legacy, we're going to think in terms of beginning with the end in mind, to take a page out of Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If we can begin with the end in mind and really think about, what do I want to be known for? What do I want my legacy to be when I step away from my career? That can add just a ton of clarity in terms of what we want to stand for now, what our why, what our purpose is now, and also guide us in terms of what's going to be the yardstick I use to measure myself against. And then the third piece that I think the first 2 pieces will help us back into is basically, what commitments do I need to make in terms of the actions I need to start taking now? Okay. So if I think about what I value most, I think about my legacy in terms of where I want to end up on this journey of my career and the purpose I serve. Well, then what are the commitments and actions I need to lean into right now, starting today, to make that long-term legacy true? Let's unpack this first piece. What do you value most? There's more than one way to think about this, because our values, what's important to us at our core, frankly, just looks different for each person. So I think there's different ways to get at it. I want to give you a couple strategies on how you might go about that. For one, I want you to zoom out from your career, zoom out from your personal life, kind of take a 10,000 foot view of everything that comprises your entire life right now. Okay. So take a really holistic kind of 10,000 foot view of your life. And I want you to really ask yourself, what is most important to you? Okay. Whether it's what's the most important to you today, what has been important for you for years and years, as you look forward, what will be important for you? So it's a past, present, future look at our values. And so one approach I've taken with this to gain some clarity there are thinking about the values, the things I need to be true in my life for me to be fulfilled, happy, successful. And so I actually put pen to paper on these about 10, 12 years ago. They've actually never changed. And they're always kind of underneath the surface of everything I do in terms of career, everything I do, with my family. And so this holistic view for me, I have some life goals that really are core to who I am and core to my values. They're to spend more time with family and friends and to travel more. And that may sound overly simplistic to you, but those are extremely valuable notions to me. And so they've provided great guidance for decisions I've made over the last 10 to 12 years. There's been roles that I've been offered, opportunities career-wise, that didn't align with that opportunity to spend more time with family and friends and travel more. And so I had to turn those down. There were roles and opportunities that I had to fight for, I had to claw, scratch, tooth and nail, because I knew how well they would align with those life goals of mine, those values that are core to who I am. And so that's one way you can look at this. Another way to think about values, and this isn't a substitute for the life goal piece that I talked about a moment ago, this is an add to. You might also think about what's most important to you in your role, okay, and the relationships that you have. And I've found a ton of personal clarity in just thinking about what do I need to have in terms of the role that I'm in, okay? And this could be personal roles, definitely professional roles. And so you might think about that. What are the things that maybe cause me to switch careers or change roles recently or take on that next opportunity? You can think about it another way. If you were to choose to switch jobs really soon, what would you have to have in that new role to feel fulfilled, to feel excited about what you're doing? Okay, so you might make a short list of those things. Great way to identify what needs to be true in the role that you're in terms of the opportunity you have to serve others, be a leader, whatever that is. Think about that. The other piece is the relationships. And so the people you choose to surround yourself with, both personally and professionally, what's true about those people versus the people that you don't bring in as closely? And so what do you look for in other human beings? What do you want them to see in you? And so for me, integrity. Integrity has always been at the top of my list in terms of if we have a run-in and there's friction there in the relationship, we have an argument, a disagreement, whatever it is. If it's done with integrity, though, meaning I did what I said I was going to do, you did what you said you were going to do, and we just had a misfire, I can move past that. And in fact, I see conflict as a way to honestly build relationships. So maybe another value I look for in relationships is healthy conflict, because I know what's on the other side of a kind of a tough argument sometimes is, better ideas, better relationship. But this integrity piece is so important to me because there's been people that I've actually had to kind of push away, provide tough feedback to in my career because I knew deep down there was a misfire in terms of integrity. They didn't hold up their end of the bargain. They did something that was 180 degrees different from what they said they would do. That's a tough piece to me. And so it's important for me that if I'm looking for that and expecting that in others, that's obviously something I value and that I want to exude and have people see in me. So just a kind of an in-depth example of another way to look at values. The other piece I mentioned, our second piece, the need to really feel like we can have healthy debate and conflict, meaning you're not holding back, I'm not going to hold back. Now, if you look at any research on this, Lencioni is a good example in terms of his 5 dysfunctions of a team. If we don't have trust, pretty hard to have that conflict piece take place. But I look for that in relationships. Once we have trust, I look for us to be able to kind of leave it all on the table and really have a healthy debate little bit of friction and tension, because I've just seen the power of what's available to us in the relationship on the other side, both personally and professionally. Friends would tell you, my wife would probably tell you, yeah, that's true about John. And certainly people I've worked with closely as a leader would tell you, yeah, John's no stranger, not afraid to give it to you straight and receive it straight. So a couple of values as, examples in my life, but something I challenge you to think about. What do you value most? What would have to be there for you if you were to choose to switch roles? What caused you maybe to leave a job in the past and step into a new role? What were the values that were at the core of that decision? Okay, so second piece here of raising our level of personal clarity is, again, to use Covey's words from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, begin with the end in mind. And so Covey was famous for challenging people to think about I think it was their 80th birthday celebration. And imagine everyone's there and, they basically are writing some tribute statements to you. What I want you to think about in terms of this personal clarity right now is I want you to imagine your retirement party. Okay. So fast forward, you're retiring and all of the individuals that you intended to have an impact on, that you really care about, that you influenced, that were subject to your leadership over the years are there. Okay. What would you want to hear them say that would be a testament to you that you've done it well? Okay. Because when it comes to our legacy, I've got to tell you, people aren't going to remember whether or not you went to the meeting. They're, unfortunately not going to remember if the project was turned in on time. What they will remember is how you made them feel, how you made them think, how you grew them, developed them. And so I want you to imagine this retirement party and think about, boy, all these people I've had the opportunity to touch and have an influence on. What would I want them to say about me? Again, that would be a testament that I've been the leader that I want to be and that I've been operating with a high level of personal clarity. Okay, so third area to focus on to raise that level of personal clarity is about the commitments and actions that you start to make and take right now, starting today. And so if you've spent time on your values, you got a good sense of what drives you, what motivates you, what's important to you in your life, past, present, and future. You've taken a look into the future, really challenge yourself in terms of what do I want it to all mean at the end? When I'm hanging it up in terms of my career, what do I want people to say about me? Okay, what are those testaments? Okay. Based on all of that, our values and our legacy, what commitments and actions do we need to make right now? Okay. Now, there's an approach that I like to use to this that's also from the same mentor I mentioned earlier. And it's a version of maybe what you've seen of stop, start, and continue, just put a little bit differently. Oftentimes when we're trying to grow as leaders, it's very easy to get consumed with the new actions. What are the new things I need to add to my repertoire to, assume this skill, to be the leader I want to be? And that stuff's really important. We need to take on new behaviors. But there's a couple other sets of behaviors we also need to think about. And so what I want to challenge you to think about is 3 things in terms of commitments and actions. Hold on, take on, and let go. Okay. So the hold on is you need to examine what are the behaviors you exhibit now, the activities and actions you're engaged in now that are actually serving you well. So as you think about your legacy and your values, it's very likely there's already some things that are going pretty darn well for you. And so one of the worst things I see leaders do is they try to raise their level of personal clarity, try to become this brand new, improved version of themselves, is they actually forget to resume behaviors that were already serving them well because they're so focused on the new things that they want to do to try to, kind of assume this new identity, if you will. So understand there is stuff that you are already doing really well at a high level that's likely serving you well in terms of legacy and values and, the roles and relationships in your life. So think about what those are. Those are hold on. Make a short list. These are the things I need to hold on to. There's the more traditional one, which is take on. Okay, what are those new behaviors I need to take on to make that leadership legacy a reality? And then finally, let go. there are likely some things that you're engaged in activity-wise, some things that just need to go away. They don't serve you well. They actually stand as obstacles between who you are today and who you intend to be with this leadership legacy. So hopefully an easy approach here to break down commitments and actions, hold on, take on, and let go. Well, again, I'll encourage you to take some time with this and appreciate the fact this is an ever-evolving thing. Now, some folks will turn all of this, so you're kind of probably going to end up with kind of a collage of information in front of you: values, legacy stuff, commitments and actions, this hold on, take on, let go. Some people will pull that all together in maybe a statement. That might be something you do. You might just keep these ideas in their separate 3 buckets. But however you choose to work on it, again, I'll encourage you to take some time with it. You might also think about who else in your life might have an opinion on some of this stuff. I know for me, every time I've ever worked on this, there were always 3 really important roles. One was talking to my mentor, getting some reaction from that individual. Another person was my spouse, asking my wife exactly what she thinks and if she has opinions and feedback on where I could focus, what I could do more of, less of, and so on. And then I think as leaders, really important to talk to the people we'd like to see at that retirement party singing our praises, getting a reaction from them, finding out, do they have a perspective on the situation? And so just a way to maybe encourage you, again, spend a little time with this, figure out, are there other people that I might want to bring into the fold and talk to about this? So good luck. And thank you so much for allowing me to kind of live into my why in terms of, helping you think about your level of personal clarity. And I'm hopeful this will help you, no matter where you're beginning today, raise that level of personal clarity, whether it's getting recentered on something you've thought about in the past, or this is a brand new journey for you. I'm really excited for you and hope you'll take these steps. So next episode, as promised, we're going to dig into how to engage yourself. Once there's personal clarity, what do you do about it? How do you keep yourself engaged in activities that fulfill you and honestly recharge you so that there's more of you to go around? So hopefully you'll have an opportunity to tune in for that. Thanks so much for tuning in today, and talk to you soon.